heard the APB people. That serial killer from the plaza is headed for our happy little community. I want you looking in every garbage can, mailbox, and goddamn treehouse for this guy.
Yep, it's the Vienna Cut, one of the most sought-after Manhunt 2 mods, a passion project by Richtofen 5200, a mod that seeks to recreate the version of Manhunt 2 envisioned by Rockstar Vienna before they were closed down. It's pretty well known among the community, and despite not having a public release, it's pretty well regarded. It's gotten several different versions over the years. My first playthrough of Manhunt 2 was actually on a version of Project Vienna, as it was then called, nowadays the Vienna Cut. And I really liked it, because it opened up a lot. It came bundled with the unlocker for Manhunt 2, which added the 60 frame per second support, the extra executions, and everything else that really tidied up the game, in addition to a bunch of its own changes. So, with this latest version that's out, that you can find if you reach out to the creator, the question is, how good is it? Does it live up to the hype surrounding Rockstar Vienna's version of Manhunt 2? And is it the definitive beta mod for the game? Because Manhunt 2 has a very rich history for its beta. Alright, so we all know the story of Manhunt 2. If you want more detail, go into my Razormoon review and go listen to the initial minutes of that. We're going to go right into the nitty-gritty details of the Vienna Cut. Vienna Cut restructures its story in an interesting way, although it isn't done in a traditional manner. Instead of the usual way of playing it one level to the next until you reach the finale, there's a specific order for the levels to be in chronologically that's listed, and you can do this through loading save files that are provided with the Vienna Cut. The goal is to make it so that you're playing things in a specific order, mostly based on the internal level order, so Domestic Disturbance is an early level, and others come later on than usual, like Safe House, for instance. The whole story is reframed to focus more on concepts and theories that were around the time. In essence, Leo Casper was an IAA agent, the equivalent of the CIA in the GTA universe, investigating the project before he was captured and experimented on and eventually implanted into Danny Lamb's mind. Once the experiment goes wrong, the two break free and decide to take down the project from within, at first in 2001 and then in 2007, when they successfully break out of Dixmoor Asylum. The story follows their efforts to figure out what's happened to them, to destroy their pasts, and ultimately to figure out what to do with their futures. And I would say the story beats are the same, but the way they're handled is different, because the intro and outro cutscenes are changed. Sometimes they're straight from the game with no adjustments, like at the end of Sexual Deviants. Sometimes they're from the PSP version to expand on dialogue, like in the outro of Ghosts.
Why did I leave myself these?
Forget about that. The project betrayed us, Danny. They ruined our lives, and now they're after us again.
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna fight back.
Or in the intro of Assassination, where the beta Project Militia show up.
Lock down those buildings! Nobody gets in or out! We need backup here! If you get a visual, shoot to kill! I got a visual on the shooter!
And other times they're from early pre-release stuff, Like the ending of Release Therapy, which uses a bootlegged Russian copy of an earlier version of that cutscene. It's a little strange, but I get what the creator was going for. I think it's cool, a determination he had to make the cutscenes seem as authentic as possible, right down to stitching them together as needed and editing them so they'd fit. Although it does lead to some complications. I've found that the cutscenes don't always make sense even with the context of the story that's given, and the choice to replace Danny in some levels with Leo doesn't always work, especially because Leo still has his directing dialogue in those levels, so he'll be complimenting Danny even when he himself is carrying out kills and other things like that.
Watch out for those security lights, Danny. Any quick movement snaps them on.
On the note of beta restoration, this mod does a good job of it, and even goes a step beyond the previous version of Razormoon I played. Some elements of the 0.01 build of the PSP version of Manhunt 2 are there, so this includes even earlier models for the Project Militia that show up in Best Friends and a few other levels with them. It includes the Project Militia in Origins, since they appeared in the latter half of the level. It also extends to the way that some characters and enemies are designed. So the Legion use their beta models. You can occasionally see pervs with their beta models as well. And some weapons from Manhunt 1 that were going to reappear in Manhunt 2 make the cut. Like the hammer, the spiked baseball bat, and other things of that sort. The beta executions don't really appear though, aside from the ones that were cut from the base game that you can access with mods. So like the stuff from 0.01 doesn't make it, unfortunately. Some other beta elements are also left out, like weirdly the revolver doesn't show up in Best Friends despite it being prominent in pre-release footage and screenshots. I thought that'd be a pretty obvious inclusion, but it's left out here. You just get the light handgun instead. Same goes for some other changes as well. There's some elements where I felt like they could have gone a little further to get that beta feeling going. Like, the pervs don't show up in Bee's honey pots, and there's some elements like how in Origins the watchdogs don't appear at all despite being in the first half of the 0.01 build. But generally speaking, it accomplishes the goal it's going for. It tries to give you the feeling of an earlier version of Manhunt 2, and it succeeds. It uses the earlier intro that you can find in the PSP version. It has some of the logos and iconography from the original ideas of Manhunt 2, and some of the dialogue from earlier versions is repurposed for this version of Manhunt 2.
The pervs run this club. They're pure sleaze. Guys come in expecting a blowjob, they go out Project Zombies. They'd rip your head off in a heartbeat.
It's a good effort. It isn't always perfect, but it gets across what it's trying to go for. Aside from the cutscene confusion, I like the additions. I like the new weapons added, even if, like, the blackjack is really broken, doesn't show up at all in enemy hands. But the hammer works really well, and the returning executions from Manhunt 1 are a nice inclusion. I also like how some guns behave differently. On that note, let's talk about the aiming system, because that's a huge overhaul, and I think that's worthy of a segment in of itself. Manhunt 2 has kind of a weird aiming system by default, where it's kind of like free aiming, but there's also a lock-on that happens when enemies are close enough. If you move your crosshair near them, it'll lock on to indicate that you can insta-kill them with a headshot. Which is okay, but it kind of takes out some of the difficulty of the game. The Vienna Cut makes it so that it's completely free aim. Like, there's no lock-on, you have to do the shooting yourself. You have to make sure that all your shots count, which adds an extra layer of challenge. It also places the shooting camera above your head when you're aiming to give you a clearer shot, except when you're in cover. By itself, these are some two nice features. The crosshair also just being a normal crosshair instead of the spinning disc thing are also nice additions. The trouble is trying to shoot when you're standing up or moving instead of being in cover. It can be tricky. If you really want to get a good shot off, you need to be in cover or crouching, because if you're trying to line up repeated shots, the camera will jolt down from above your head to the over-the-shoulder aim, and that can be really jarring. It can be tough to land shots in the heat of the moment, especially with slower guns like the light handgun. And that's cost me at least a couple of lives in the game before. It's a compromise, because it seems like the aiming system is tougher to work with than the first game, where you were able to just do a complete free aim system there. And I do like the added difficulty of having to make sure that you know the range where a headshot will insta-kill versus knowing when you're going to need multiple shots to put down an enemy, so the game isn't just doing all the hard work for you. It works well also with the execution system, since by default guns have all their 3 levels of execution here. Something though that I would like to point out is that trying to play through the Vienna Cut by itself, by like a new save file, doesn't really work. There's a severe issue in my build of it where the game will proceed normally. Despite what I had read, it doesn't have an internal structure modified at all, so levels appear in the regular order. After you complete Domestic Disturbance, you should move on to Personality Clash, but instead the game loads B's Honeypot, and if you continue from there, and if you allow the game to be saved, you'll be starting again from that point. None of your data from the previous levels will be saved. You'll essentially be stuck in a loop there.
Leo? Leo? Leo!
If you want to experience the whole mod, you have to have a completed save file. But it's made even more complicated by the fact that Personality Clash does not load. You can't play this level in the build I had, which was weird because the original build I had, the Project Vienna build, that one worked. I had footage of it on my channel of showing off the AK-47, which was a really cool addition in Release Therapy and Personality Clash. Every time you try to load Personality Clash in this build, it crashes. I had heard that loading it by going through the campaign with a new campaign file, that's how you would do it, but that didn't work because of the glitch that sends you back to B's Honeypot. So it's really disappointing. I wanted to see if anything significant had changed in that area. Release Therapy had some good additions. It's meant to be the canon finale to the Vienna Cut, and I'd say it has a good climactic feeling to it. I like the return of the Beta Legion, and it definitely has that ominous feeling that the vanilla version had. I will, however, say that the Russian text in the outro cutscene is distracting. There's only so much you can do when your only source for that rare cutscene is a pirated Russian version, so I'm not faulting the creator there. It's just a shame that whatever happened to Personality Clash kind of just broke the level, or prevented you from loading it entirely.
He's trying to get to the train yard. This is our last chance, watchdogs. Take up your positions and ready your weapons.
I'd also like to point out that the cutscenes in their revised order sometimes don't really make sense. I guess you'd have to play the game in its intended order for things to match up, but when you are watching the playthrough of the Vienna Cut on Richtofen's channel, it's definitely different. Like, there are melee weapons and other things present in Release Therapy that aren't in the final build, the build I got, which I had been looking forward to, and it was kind of a disappointment to not find them there. I guess some things are more restructured there to be a beta recreation than a true mod, given that there's more you can do with editing and such. The use of the Leo interrogation tape was a nice addition, though. And now, For the big question, which is better? Which does the better job of being a beta restoration mod? Razormoon or the Vienna Cut? And honestly, I'd give it to Razormoon. It's nothing against the Vienna Cut. I enjoyed the mod, all things considered. I like the new aiming system, flaws and all. I think that the cutscene changes are cool and creative. I like the texture adjustments, like how Leo has an IAA uniform in the flashback levels. I like how sometimes characters appear differently in flashbacks, like how in Domestic Disturbance you appear as Flashback Danny, and therefore you're seeing what everybody else is actually seeing during that rampage of a level. I like how beta enemies show up, and how the time was taken to include more designs from the 0.01 build. But to me, Razormoon goes the extra mile. I mean, aside from the fact that you can beat the entire thing without a crash happening, it feels more streamlined and to the point. The additions feel like they're supposed to be there. They feel like, okay, this is like an earlier take on it. It would explain why there are voice lines for the pervs in Safe House, why the revolver showed up in early versions of Best Friends, and so on and so forth, as well as making good use of beta assets like the machete and other early weapons. I would recommend it both mods, without a doubt. I enjoyed them both, but if you had to choose one or the other, I would say Razormoon takes it.
I won!
At this point, it basically is the definitive restoration mod. We can amend the title of the other video because a lot of my problems with Razormoon at the time have basically been resolved, both through the Manhunt 2 plugin and through updates to Razormoon. So, shout out to the creator, Chorpthorn, for doing that. But still, also shout out to Richtofen 5200, because the Vienna Cut is a fantastic mod, and I would strongly recommend trying it out. And there is one other detail I love about the mod that has to be brought up. Red Light has the glorious addition. If you backtrack in the level, there is a light handgun with 15 rounds you can find. And it's entirely optional, and it completely breaks the balance of the level, but it is so fun to use.
You lost, buddy? We'll show you the way home. Your kings will be here! And
It just completely allows you to mop the floor with the Red Kings and the other enemies. It upends the balance in a hilarious way, and I absolutely had a ball bringing it with me. Especially because I had some ammo left over, and I was able to fight off some of the watchdogs that shoot at you in the finale of the level. It was a satisfying, cathartic moment. And I love that this is slipped into, like, if you're digging around, oh hey, here's a handgun I can use on some very frustrating enemies. It was a very inventive inclusion, especially because the gun's already in the level. You just needed to plop it down for someone to find.
Daniel?
Daniel, please untie me.
Danny isn't here.
So with that positive note in mind, check out the Vienna Cut if you get the chance. I have to give some props to Richtofen 5200 for giving me my first playthrough, making it such a delight with all the unlocked content and beta content put to use, and for updating and revising the Vienna Cut to include stuff we've only seen in the 0.01 build. It's only been a few months since that came to light, so the guy's clearly been busy trying to revise it and trying to open up new options for it. It's cool to see those elements of gameplay be brought back from there, like the variety of Project Militia models. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to give the Vienna Cut a shot. It's a very good Manhunt 2 mod, and I would recommend playing it with a full save file so you can experience the whole thing, either from the original level order or the revised level order that Richtofen recommended. Thanks again, guys. Take care.